Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new deck profile video. Today we're going to be talking about Whimsicott VIV, one of my favorite cards. I've built probably about 6 or 7 different variants of Whimsicott VIV, just because it's one of my favorite cards of all time. The main strategy is around its attack, Flying Fury. Before doing damage, you may discard any number of tools from your Pokemon in play. Stack does 40 more for each card you discard in this way. Maximizing at 490 damage. Is that number actually relevant? Believe it or not, yes, I have done 490 for a relevant number before. So basically, you want to get a bunch of tools, discard them, all that. Shout out to Pokegear.app. I've always had it in the corner here, but I suppose it deserves a specific shout out because I have been using it in all of these videos. So anyway, you start off with 4 Cottonee. The reason you play the Psychic one, despite its attack being terrible, is because it's searchable with Mysterious Treasure and Fog Crystal, which we'll get to later. If you're not playing like a purely Psychic version of the deck, you could play the Fairy Cottonee, which has a draw 1 for 1 energy. It's pretty terrible as well, but it has better artwork in my opinion. This one's still great though, cute artwork, and it's more accessible with the search options we're playing. Like I said, the Fairy one's always an option. I do have 2 different variants of the deck that plays the Fairy one instead. It's personally up to you. 3 copies of Mew. This is the backbone of the deck. This is what differs this deck from other Whimsicott variants I've built, is the Mew and its Mysterious Tail. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck if it's active, and then put an item into your hand. You can do that multiple times, but realistically, you're going to only use it once per turn unless you're on the first turn of the game. A lot of times on the first turn of the game, if you can get 2 Mews and use 2 Mysterious Tails, you're going to do that, as long as you can have 2 Cottonees on the bench as well. You just want to use it to grab all your items. You can see we only play 4 copies of supporter cards, but frankly that's just fine because we have so many items in the deck that it really doesn't matter. You don't need supporter cards as much, and you can recycle them even with Versus Seeker, which is an item. We play 2 copies of the Sigilyph here. This is an inarguable spot. You use it for the Toolbox ability. If you have 4 or less, or if you can have 4, up to 4 Pokemon tools attached to it. If it loses the ability, discard tools until it has only 1 on it. So you just want to stack your tools on this Sigilyph. It's just there for stacking tools. You're never going to attack with it. The attacks that I haven't mentioned so far are basically not relevant. I suppose I should do this. Triple draw for 1 colorless, draw 3. I have used this before. It is good. Mainly you're here for Flying Fury though. So Oricorio-GX Dance of Tribute. If one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you can draw 3 cards. So the reason you use this is you want to keep chaining these cards. Oricorio's not always going to be useful, but whenever you get a Pokemon knocked out, and a lot of times you're going to get Whimsicott's knocked out, it has only 90 HP after all. Fairy Tree is nice though. So a lot of times you're going to get knocked out by a Stiff Breeze. You want to use Oricorio's Dance of Tribute to draw a few extra cards. It's a great card. I wouldn't play any Whimsicott list without it, except for maybe there's one of them that I play without it, I suppose. And then here's the interesting part of the deck. I quite like this as my decision. 1 copy of Tapu Lele-GX. This one's actually notable, so we will go over the attacks. 1 Psychic Tapu here, heal all damage from 2 of your bench Pokemon. Can come in handy, is not bad. You don't have any other GX attacks you really want to use, so that's useful. 2 energy for 2 colorless Psych. Energy Drive, not Side Drive. Does 20 for each energy touch to each active, not applied weakness or resistance. So this isn't bad at all. Realistically, you just want to use this if you're really struggling and your opponent has something like a Senna Scorch, I guess. You don't really see that often. Blissey is probably a better example. You occasionally see Blissey in Expanded. And what you want to do in that case is just energy drive it for a lot of damage. A lot of times that can take a 1-hit KO on an otherwise unlosable match. Your opponent kind of has to play into it, but it isn't out. Now what it's mainly here for is the Wonder Tag ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, during your turn you may search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, put it into your hand. And you use that to fish your very low amount of supporter copies. You see that we only have 4 supporters. How do you get them when there's only 4 of them and Mew doesn't grab them? You get them mainly using Tapu Lele. But also we play 1 copy of Jirachi-EX with its Stellar Guidance ability, which does the same exact thing. Stellar Guidance, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Now you'll notice that we actually play both of these. Usually a deck will play one or the other. The reason I do this is because of our search options. Now I'm just going to talk about our search. We'll get back to the supporters in a minute. We play 4 copies of Level Ball, search for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less. This mainly grabs Jirachi. You're seeing a thing here. We play 2 copies of Mysterious Treasure. Discard a card from your hand. Search for a Psychic or Dragon Pokemon. It does search for everything in the deck except for Jirachi. And 2 copies of Fog Crystal, searching for a Psychic Energy card or a basic Psychic Pokemon. And it's great for getting Energy, obviously, as well. But here's the thing. With this split, you give yourself 4 outs to Lele and 4 outs to Jirachi. There's no way to really perfect it without playing like Ultra Ball, which this deck really can't afford to play Ultra Ball. So you play these lines because this gives you the perfect 50-50 split of outs to these 2 at one time. Obviously, you want to go a little bit harder on the non-Level Ball search if you just want to fish these 2. But Level Ball gives you access to the Whimsicott pieces, the Mew, and the Sigilyph, so it's often a lot more useful. So you want to definitely run 4 Level Ball. You could run 3 Fog Crystal, 1 Mysterious Treasure, and I wouldn't think that's bad. But Mysterious Treasure also acts as another Whimsicott out, so you have 6 outs to Whimsicott, you have 8 outs to Energy. We have like 10 outs to Whimsicott, but you get what I'm saying. It's just very solid. I've found that playing this list when you have the split here makes it a lot more interesting. 2 copies of Professor Juniper, discard your hand, draw 7. Could be Professor's Research as well, Professor Sycamore, whatever you prefer. If you pick Research Magnolia, you are weird. Just the best draw card in Expanded. You can't really afford to discard with Ultra Ball, but discarding with Juniper is just fine. You usually have pretty small hand sizes anyway, unless you're just sitting on a huge hand from taking a bunch of prizes. So this card works quite well. You play 2 copies because it's the best supporter in the deck, but you don't play any more because you don't want Mew to brick you. You want to be able to find your pieces to find these cards, not just hit these cards. 1 copy of Guzma. Switch your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. If you do, switch your active with one of your bench Pokemon. This does allow you to get a second Mysterious Tail off, but most importantly, it's just for gusting. You can use this to gust the opponent. You're usually only going to gust about 1 to 2 times a game at most, so you really only need 1 copy. It's really only a struggle if it's prized. And then you can obviously verse Seeker back if you have to discard it early on. 1 copy of Marnie. Each player shuffles a hand, puts it on the bottom. You draw 5, your opponent draws 4. You could play N in here, and I could see why that would be good. Generally, I found Marnie to be better in almost every deck. N is like just not as good in non-control lists nowadays. You just want that early Marnie start. A lot of times if you just Marnie your opponent turn 1 going second as well, they'll just brick for a couple turns, and that's all you need to win a lot of times. So I find Marnie better than N. Talk about the search cards here. Next we'll go on to 4 Adventure Bag. Search a deck for 2 Pokemon tool cards, reveal them, put them into your hand. Obviously, Whimsicott's damage relies on the amount of tool cards. So with Adventure Bag, you give yourself 4 outs to find 2 tool cards at any point in the game. You could run a lower count, but the thing that you want to do here is you want to hit Mew as often as possible. With Mysterious Tail, you're going to hit your Adventure Bags often. Remember that every time you get a KO taken, not only do you get an option to Dance of Tribute if Oricorio is in play, but you're going to promote a Mew with a retreating option to use Mysterious Tail to build your tools back up. So you have a lot of outs every time you get KO'd. Adventure Bag gives you lots of outs to find your tools. Again, it's a great card. You could run 3, but I just don't think the list is good without it. The next card is a personal choice. You could not run this, and the list would run fine. I just prefer it. 1 copy of Scoop Up Cyclone. This could realistically be a Life Dew, a Dowsing Machine, a Computer Search, or Scoop Up Cyclone. The reason I chose Scoop Up Cyclone is that a lot of times the way that people will beat this deck is just by taking advantage of these early placed Pokemon. A lot of times you're going to place a Jirachi or a Lele very early to use Professor Juniper to draw into your pieces so you can get a big board set up. And realistically, you don't want to do that. So a lot of times you're only going to play usually 1 of these per game. If you play a second one, that's pretty generous, usually for like a Guzma or something. But you can pick up the one you play, and then you really only ever have a 2-prize liability in Oricorio, which a lot of times you don't even play until the later stages of the game. So you keep your board mostly of 1-prizers, prevent your opponent from just taking advantage of you by winning a prize trade in that way. And it also does allow you to reuse these abilities, because right here, this does not say once per turn. Right here, this does not say once per turn. So realistically, if you need to, and you can just reuse these, if I just need a supporter, and that's my only out, I will Scoop Up Cyclone, get those guys, get the supporter, and off we go. Sadly, you cannot reuse Dance Tribute. It does say only once per turn. So, I have tried to do that before to no avail. Next, we have 1 copy of Random Receiver. You could play 2 of this if you want. I don't think you need more than 1. Plus, I only have 1 Secret Rare in PTCGO. This is a Mysterious Tail Out. It's an item card that grabs you supporters. It's not the best card in the world, but it generally gets you what you want, considering you only have 4 supporters. The only disappointing one you almost always end up getting is Guzma, so you could cut it if you want. I like having a supporter out on an item, and Cross Transceiver and Pokegear especially don't really do it because you have 4 supporters in Tech Pro. Pokegear is not finding it. 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher and 1 copy of Super Rod. You could also run the Rescue Carrier. I've played over 1,500 games with Whimsicott variants, and this is like the perfect split in all but one or two of the decks, because this just allows you to, at any point, make sure you have the right energy. You could play Ordinary Rod over Super Rod, I suppose, and that would still work fine. I prefer Super Rod. This gives you the chance to have the energy you need and the Pokemon you need, and Rescue Stretcher gives you that 1-of out to get any Pokemon. A lot of times you're going to even be getting things like Oricorio if you discarded it early, because you weren't using it, or you could get back Sigilyph if your opponent's targeting them down. You want to have that instant 1-of out. Getting back a Whimsicott, of course, to attack is always something you want. This 1-1 split has done me so well in all the games I've played with this deck, all the variants of this deck, besides one of them that's just really heavy Rescue Carrier. Maybe I'll talk about that one day. If you want another Whimsicott video, let me know. Versus Seeker, 3 copies, used to get your supporters back. It's not the most live card in the world, though, because you don't play a lot of supporters, so you don't need 4. 2 copies of Eco Arm. Shuffle 3 tool cards from your scoop out into your deck. You're going to need to recover your tools, because they get discarded. Besides, U-Turn Board. U-Turn Board is your best tool. If you're using your Adventure Bag, you're using it to get 2 U-Turn Boards whenever possible. If there's only 1 U-Turn Board in your deck left, you're grabbing that 1 U-Turn Board. You want as many of these in play as possible, because when it's discarded, it gets put into your hand instead of the discard pile, and it provides free retreat on everything in the deck. Isn't that great? They all have 1 retreats. U-Turn Board provides that 1 retreat for them. It's amazing. 4 copies of Float Stone. You want to give yourself those retreat outs again, especially since you're a Mew-focused deck. You want to give yourself that many outs to using Mysterious Tail 1 to 2 times. You want to always have them set up. You always want to have that promotion ready. If you start like a Lele or a Oricorio, you want to be able to retreat it. Giving yourself those 8 retreat outs without having to retreat your limited energy counts is ideal. 2 copies of Rescue Scarf. If it's knocked out, the Pokemon that's attached to knocked out, you get to put the Pokemon back in your hand. Generally, you're not going to be leaving too many tools in play. Generally, I'm going to say that you don't want to like really put a tool on an active Pokemon, because then the tool's going to get discarded when your opponent knocks it out. You generally want to put this tool, like if you have enough to take a KO, I mean, you can put it on the active. There's situations where you definitely do that if you need to like chain a Whimsicott and you don't have any other way to do it. But a lot of times you're going to like leave this on a Sigilyph on the bench, or like something like an Oricorio maybe, but mainly Sigilyph. You just want to give yourself outs to get that back. There's a lot of tools you could play in here. I think that Rescue Scarf and Lucky Egg are just the best ones. Remember, you could play Spell Tag to give yourself a bit of damage modification, but you cannot play things like Choice Band or Choice Belt or Muscle Band, because before doing damage, you discard the tools. Therefore, if you were to attach to active and discard it, it would not do any more. And if you're not discarding it, you're doing less than you would be just discarding it in the first place. So do not play Choice Band, do not play Choice Belt, do not play Muscle Band. 2 copies of Lucky Egg. This is the other great tool. A lot of times you're going to use this in the early game if you just can't set up. You don't find yourself using it too often, but if you have to, it's a tool out that you, if your Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. Not at all bad. I think it's good. You could obviously make arguments for other tools in here, especially the Life Dew over Scoop Up Cyclone. I quite like these though. It's worked well for me. And those are good. So you see here we have 12 tools in total. Is that 12 tools? I am a fool. That is 12 tools. I am not a fool. So your max damage cap is 490. I just kind of want to talk about some damage odds real quick after we go over these last few cards. Chaotic Swell, obviously, just kind of an anti-stadium. You lose to Silent Lab and you lose to Item Lock. Nothing you can do about Item Lock, but you can keep Silent Lab off for some time and just win and sweep your opponent. And 6 Psychics. I just want to clarify, this deck isn't really a meta deck because of Item Lock and Silent Lab. You just kind of lose to those. There's nothing you can do about it. You don't always lose this to Silent Lab, but like against like something like Shadow Rider, where they can just lock it in, you're not doing great. Alolan Muck obviously will just destroy you if the Shadow Rider player plays that. So it's not really a meta deck. It was very good in the Chilling Rain format, a list that was different from this, obviously, because Mew wasn't out then. But it's just one of my favorite cards, and I love talking about it. So I'm going to talk about some damage odds here. If you discard 4 tools from play, you're doing 170 damage. Now, 170 damage isn't super relevant, but it is a KO on Tapu Lele, which a lot of decks are playing. Also KO on Dedenne GX. You are missing that crucial 180 for Crobat, but it is not a big deal. So you could just do 170. If you really can't take a KO, you can sometimes just slap for 170, which is 4 U-turn boards, and like not waste your other tools. Don't risk them being discarded if you know your opponent's going to pick up the active. You might as well just U-turn board, or you could even triple draw. There was a game where I said I did have to do 490 damage against a Colossal VMAX deck, and they had with 4 Stone Fightings and a not Cape of Toughness, it's the Heavy Duty Boots. They give it plus 50 HP. They had an effective 470 HP, so I did actually have to do 490, and I won the game because I went down to like 4 cards in deck, but I got all 12 tools in play and was able to take that crucial knockout. So regarding those, you mainly want to discard U-turn boards. You always discard U-turn boards first. A lot of times you're not even going to play a tool in play if you're not discarding it, because you don't want to give your opponent field blower outs unless you're just like needing to, you know, use a Lucky Egg to like draw out of a dead hand or leave a Rescue Scarf on a Sigilyph. Those are not bad plays at all. You just don't want to give your opponent field blower out and start in the Megaphone if they're playing that. That one can be especially damaging if you play like Fool. So I said 4 tools. 5 tools is 210. That's a great number. You're hitting a lot of basic Vs. You are missing some of the big ones, like, for instance, Zacian, if you run into that, or Dragonite. You will hit things like Volcarona. I believe Shadow Rider has 210 as well. Serena has 220, sadly. You are missing that. But there are quite a few things you do hit for 5 tools. 6 tools is 250, another big number. 250 is hitting some of the tag teams on the lower end. If you do see them, obviously. 7 is another big number. You're doing 290 damage, and 290 is clearing Eggrow, ADP, you know, the big tag teams, Reshazard, Arceus V-Star, Palkia V-Star, some of the bigger guys. You don't really win against Palkia V-Star because they just Greninjas or Radiant Greninja you and just wipe out 2 Whimsicotts. You don't really have an out to that matchup. Same with like Shadow Rider. You just only win them on Miracle. You may be wondering why I don't play Ranger in this deck. You know, we talked about ADP just a minute ago. You win against ADP by just killing an ADP and then gusting their next attacker before they can do anything. Ranger does not improve your matchup at all in that matchup, and it's not worth playing. In regards to that, 8 tools is 330 damage. It does crucially miss 340, but that's most of your VMAXs. Shadow Rider, for instance. Thinking also on Sandaconda. That's not really a meta VMAX, but you know what I mean. It's most of your VMAXs. Obviously, then you go to 9 tools, and you're doing 300 and... Is it? Yeah, 370. Yeah, and that's getting like all of your VMAXs. That's basically getting everything. And then obviously 10 is 410, 11 is 450, and 12 is 490. And really, outside of that one Colossal example I gave, are you going to run into those situations where you need 12 tools? You run the excess just so you can discard them and then find them without having to recover literally every tool every turn with Eco Arm. 2 Eco Arms does suffice, as long as you don't have to just like get rid of them off the first Juniper. That would be rough. You'd probably go for Marnie in that case off of a deck search if possible. But yeah, this is one of my favorite rogue decks to play. It's not great against a lot of the meta because of things like item lock, things, you know, it's like just auto-lose the item lock, and you don't do well against Altered Creation, you don't do well against Silent Lab and basic ability lock, but it's a hell of a lot of fun to play. So I wanted to share this deck, one of my favorite builds I've ever done. This is literally me from scratch. I've tested over 1,500 games with different Whimsicott lists, so I kind of know my stuff when it comes to my favorite Whimsicott. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next deck profile.